authenticity is just so important to me that to have disregarded it for so long that, like she literally says, I feel like I have no pulse. That feels very severe to me, to feel so inauthentic that you feel worse than death.
And welcome to Matt and Lucy Mind the Gap, where we explore the big questions about how we work, live, lead, and grow across the generations. I'm Mad, pronouns she, her.
And I'm Lucy, pronouns she, her. In today's episode, we're diving into a story that became a cultural moment, Eat, Pray, Love. Whether you loved it, hated it, or fell somewhere in between, the memoir sparked something big, a conversation around identity, expectations, and what it means to walk away from a life that looks good on paper but doesn't feel like yours.
But Eat, Pray, Love isn't just about one woman's journey. It's a lens into how different generations understand success, duty, and self-actualization. What were we taught to want? What did we actually get? And how are we rewriting the script today? And today, to dig into the topic, we have our very own podcast producer, Lara Dollens, Millennial and Blanchard's Director of Next Gen Leadership Innovation. Welcome.
Thank you, Mad. Thank you, Lucy. Yeah, that's a mouthful, isn't it? Next Gen Leadership Innovation.
So glad to have you in this conversation. Just to start us off with some context, we know that Eat, Pray, Love is a best-selling memoir by Elizabeth Gilbert that follows her journey of self-discovery after a painful divorce and a personal crisis. So in her early 30s, feeling lost and disconnected, she decides to leave behind her seemingly perfect life in search of something more authentic. And the book is divided into 3 parts, each set in a different country. So for Eat, she goes to Italy and indulges in food and pleasure, and she learns to enjoy life again. For Pray, she goes to India and explores spirituality and inner peace through meditation at an ashram. And for Love, she goes to Indonesia or Bali and seeks balance and unexpectedly finds love. So just keeping that in mind, just opening up to the room. When you first watched or read Eat, Pray, Love, what was your reaction?
So honestly, I think I had a love-hate relationship with that book, really. I felt, I think, deeply seen in it, but frustrated at the same time because, part of me thought, yes, who doesn't want to just burn it all down and go off and find yourself? For real, right? I think they call that midlife crisis. I don't know, but another part of me, I just rolled my eyes a bit and was like, okay, who actually gets to take off for a year like that? But still, the part where she woke up one day and just realized that her life didn't feel like hers, that I really definitely related to.
I had no patience for that book.
Yeah.
I threw it across the room.
That's a very emotional reaction, though.
I have emotional
reactions.
books. I haven't thrown that many across the room, but that was one of them.
But now I'm curious why.
It just felt so self-indulgent to me. It's like, oh, come on, get a real problem.
Get a real problem. Yeah.
Which, like when I work with clients who haven't found the language yet, but are expressing that feeling, like usually people who've climbed the ladder only to realize that the ladder was up against the wrong wall. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, crud. It's too late to go to grad school, which it's never too late. I'm proof of that. It's too, I missed the boat, whatever. I'm very empathetic. So I don't know why, maybe when I read it, I was feeling that way and felt so trapped that there was none of that in store for me. And I think that has to do with having kids, right? You can't just go to Italy to eat. It's just really impatient with it. And I'm a huge Elizabeth Gilbert fan, don't get me wrong. How about you, Lucy?
Well, I don't know that I physically wanted to throw it across the room, but I don't know that it felt like the relatable story that it is for so many other people. I actually only have watched the movie and I watched it for the first time just a couple months ago. So it's still pretty fresh for me. But I remember being like, kind of going to it expecting that it was going to be this life-changing thing, just because that's what I had heard from so many, like, especially older women in my life, that it was like this story of coming into your own sense of self and taking ownership of your life, all those kinds of things. And I watched it and I was like, it didn't hit like in the way that everybody said that it would. And I felt conflicted about it because I recognized that, yes, like that is definitely the journey for some people. But I was like, I don't at all see myself in this spot. And I think the part that I kept getting tripped up on wasn't so much the journey itself, because I do think like travel as this means of self discovery, like that's great. Like that's a value that I have even. It was more like the premise of waking up one day and feeling like your life doesn't belong to you. Like you talked about that, Laura, as being a point of connection for you. For me, it's like it's hard to imagine ever getting to that point. And part of that, I think, is probably life experience. I just haven't had to make those big decisions yet and come out on the other side, right? But the other part of it, I think, is that authenticity is just so important to me that to have disregarded it for so long that, like she literally says, I feel like I have no pulse. That feels very severe to me, to feel so inauthentic that you feel worse than death.
Yeah.
So that part was interesting and conflicting for me.
Well, part of me feels like you just haven't had an opportunity to completely screw up your life yet.
Right. That could be it too. Absolutely.
But I also think it's you, Lucy. You are a thinker and you think deeply about everything and every choice you make.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is just who you are. I don't know that it's necessarily a mark of your generation. Do you think it is?
I appreciate you saying that. And I do think I can be a bit of like an extreme example just because I am very introspective, process things internally, and like very concerned about harmony. That's one of my core values that will show up if you read like my Myers-Briggs thing. It'll tell you peace and harmony is like my number one thing, even to my own detriment, right? So I'm kind of an extreme case, but I do think that my generation, having watched sort of the millennials and Gen X in our lives, especially like our parents and grandparents, sort of struggle through inauthentic choices and kind of the consequences that came from that. I do think that collectively we want to do better. I think some people have more agency and more awareness to make those choices that feel more authentic. And I think I'm fortunate enough to maybe call myself part of those people. But generally, I think we all want better. And isn't that kind of true for every generation too? Like we kind of just want to do better than what we've seen. But I think specifically for us, having watched the millennials and the Gen X kind of deal with, well, the scripts that we've been given, they're not working. They're not working the way that they were promised. Yeah. So like what happens then? So we kind of throw out the scripts a little bit earlier, I think, depending who you ask.
I agree. I think that it makes a lot of sense. In order to have this moment of waking up one day and realizing, your life isn't what you expected or what you wanted, you have to have those expectations to start with, right? You have to, whether they're wherever they came from, whether they're false or true. And I think that, well, I know that myself and a large part of my generation was very much handed this is how the course of your life should go. These are the things that indicate whether you're successful or not. These are, a typical progression of what you can expect or what to aim for. And these are the things that you should do in order to get it right. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, even after checking off all those boxes at different times, I definitely had a moment where I woke up and I was like, oh, nothing is pretty much like what I was told it was going to be like. Mm-hmm. And now I don't even know what to do with that. So I'm raising a Gen Z, and I have tried to do kind of the opposite of, in that regard, different focuses on what does success look like? What is life going to look like? Hopefully to set her up with less, expectations in that way, at least. I don't think I'm the only one doing that with the younger generation.
Yeah. I mean, even with my own parents, who I think would probably fall on kind of the line between Gen X and millennial, although their experience is more millennial, in my opinion. My mom has told me, like, you don't have to meet my expectations. Like, you don't have to follow the same path that I did. You don't have to get married. You don't have to do XYZ. Like, just do what you think is right for you. I think, growing up like that it seems like a commonplace kind of narrative, right? Like, be yourself, do what you want to do, be true to you. But it's just so crazy to think that just within the last generation, that's only been when that's kind of come into the common narrative. At least that's kind of the gist that I've gotten.
I was definitely told, do you do what you want to do, but within these boundaries, within these expectations
It's funny because I'm technically a boomer, right? I was born in 1960, which is the very, very tail end of the baby boomers. And I never felt like one of them. The message I got growing up was there's nothing you can't do. The world is your oyster. The only thing in your way of creating the life you want is your own preconceptions or biases, or I guess your family's expectations. I remember when I was about to graduate from college, I just felt this crushing responsibility to create and manifest my own perfect life. And, I'm 21, right? I'm like, I had no idea what that was. I really didn't know. Because I'd always gotten the message, you can be a doctor, you can be a nuclear physicist. Not true, by the way, that second one.
Do you think that was the typical experience for your generation?
No, because I think it is the first wave of boomers who made that up and sent the message. Those were, the young adults when I was a kid. And I very much got the message, you can have it all. You can have kids. You can have a career. You can go to Italy and eat. You can do it all. And that was a complete myth, which I didn't know. And I think the message, you can have it all, was detrimental.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But I think the message that I've reshaped is that you can have it all. You just can't have it all at the same time. You have to figure out how to manage the stages. And I think that, Lucy, is something that your generation is getting its head around, is that, yeah, okay, these are the things I think I want. Let me think about which order, especially as women, right? I think for men, it's just different. Lucy, do you think that's a message that you have gotten?
It's not all at the same time as much as you just have to be prepared for the consequences of whatever choice you make. Just for thinking about myself personally, I feel like I'm very intentional about the expectations that I set for myself and then I set for my relationships, so that I'm not to the point where I'm unhappy with the state of things because I'm expecting more than is possible at the moment. I'm being very intentional about what is realistic for me right now. What is a good thing to look forward to? How can I keep it to where it feels like I'm moving towards something, but it doesn't feel like this big ominous thing that will never come? You were talking about wanting to have it all and expecting that you could. And then once you got to that point, it was, well, where's the payoff? How do I actually do it? And I think the expectation part is realizing that it takes a lot of work to have it all, if you even can. And that sometimes it won't be possible, and that there will be different seasons of life, and that it's about being adaptive and continuing to reevaluate those expectations, not like to kind of expect disappointment necessarily, but just to not expect the world all at once. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the same thing that I tell my own kid, that I have to balance out the message of, yes, I believe in you and your abilities and your strengths. And at the same time, here is realistically what you should aim for. I was told growing up, get a job in whatever you love. Don't worry about how much money you're making. I think that was pretty common, at least in US culture. It was pretty common for your middle class, at the time.
The do what you love and the money will follow.
And that is BS, y'all.
It is.
So I don't even kind of tell my child that. a lot of things started coming into play when I hit those key moments in life, those key stages. I was raised on the classic script, so that's what I did. I went to college, I got married, I bought a house, and then things just kind of started falling through with the whole housing crash in 2008, right?
Did you get upside down on a house?
I did. Yeah, and a lot of people did. The job market was really difficult for me, even with a college degree and working on another one. And I got divorced, and it all happened within a brief period of time. So the Eat, Pray, Love book, it was, I think, published in 2006. The book was, right? But it really took off when would that movie come out? Wasn't that like 2010, I think?
That sounds right.
Yeah. It was right in that, I think, span of time where we were doing all of these things that we expected to lead to this great life. And then a lot of things fell through for people. My experience it's definitely not the only story like that. And so that's why I think the story of this book came through so well, is because, okay, if you follow all of these steps and then something happens, that things are not within reach anymore. You feel lost. You feel like, okay, how do I start over? What do things even mean now? What am I supposed to do here? I'm supposed to be in the part of life where I'm making all the decisions and raising the children now. And I'm not even kind of ready for that.
So you were handed a script.
Very much.
So did you feel resentful?
And so when you say, did you feel resentful? I automatically think, did I feel resentful of my parents? But they're not the full, right? Because those beliefs came from more than just family. They also came from media, culture, society, all the above, right? I mean, they all really genuinely believed that that was what led to a stable life that had meaning, because it worked for them. It worked for them, and it worked for the people they knew for so long and the people before them. So, no one really talked about why we were supposed to want those things. It was just kind of a generic accepted goal in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Go to college, get a great job. This is why that life was successful. And then you'll be happy. And then you'll be happy.
Get married, buy a house,
have
a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I wasn't. I think the resentment came later, because then I found myself in this position of those weren't the answers, and nobody had them. Then all I was faced with was, well, if this isn't working for you, it's your fault. So you're doing something wrong. And that was not just from my parents, right? That was just the larger narrative that I would hear. It wasn't until recently I had a conversation with my mom, who, when I walked her through why it was I would never be able to buy a house in this market. Mm-hmm. And I used my dad as an example at what he used to make, the kind of money that he used to make at my age way back then, and what it would have to eat in order to equal now, what it would have to be in order to buy a house, at the cost that they are now. And it was like over $600,000.
Oh my gosh.
To keep up with everything and inflation. And she finally started understanding a little bit, the here and there. My parents didn't have student loans, They still lived in a time when it didn't matter what issues your relationship was having, you stayed together. Mm-hmm. So no, they didn't have the answers for me.
So Lucy, do you feel like your generation has been handed a script?
I was thinking about that, and I do think I heard the same things from like my grandma's generation. I would consider her a boomer. Just sort of internalizing that expectation of like, at some point you'll probably want to get married, have kids, buy a house, like XYZ, like all those kinds of things. But I think the main difference was that I had other voices in the mix too. I also had, especially thinking about like those millennial female role models that were in my life who were telling me different things, that other things were possible, in addition to just like who I am and how authenticity is just kind of a value for me. I was thinking about like my high school art teacher. who I think had a similar experience to you, Lara, early in her 20s, and then went on to be just this incredibly happy, fulfilled person who's just so incredibly generous and finds a way to do the things that she loves, like travel, even though she's a teacher and she's been a teacher at the same school for like 20 years. And she always encouraged me and modeled to me what that looked like, that could be possible. And she wasn't married, it wasn't anything like that. But she showed me that there isn't one path to success or to joy, like not even happiness, because I feel like that can be fleeting, but just to enjoy your life in a way that makes sense for you and for that to be contagious to other people. And I don't know if maybe either of you had people like that in your life as well, but I know she definitely made a difference on me and thinking about what was possible, like when I was really young.
Huh. Yeah, I think there definitely was a script. I don't know. I think someone gave me the script and I lost it.
That's funny.
But the one big message that I really internalized is like, there's nothing you can't do. Was that generational? Did that just come from my mother? Did it come from like the first wave of boomers? You know, it's interesting to me that boomers are being blamed for, what's the word? Consumerism, I guess, and all the plastic we've generated and all the economy that's been created where we all have to buy stuff to keep it going, which I'm like, how is that sustainable? There's no end point to that, you know? But because I always felt like the boomers were so idealistic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not the first wave of feminism. That would have been the silent generation, right? But they took up that first wave of feminism and really wrote a lot about it and talked a lot about it and political activism and moving away from traditional roles. I don't know. So, Lara, what would you want the next generation to know about defining success on their own terms?
I really like that question. You know, and I am going to say that I'm glad the mold broke with me, to be honest, with my generation. I'm glad that that script that, you know, that I was supposed to follow and go perfectly broke, because I feel so much more at this stage in my life in tune with myself and with what I want. I had to go through the whole, okay, if owning a house and being married to a man and being in a church and following a religion wasn't my story, then what was? And when I didn't have that script anymore, I was forced to redefine it myself, which is one of the reasons I loved this book. That was the love part of the hate-love relationship. I think, though, success isn't about what I can prove to the world. I think it's more creating a life that feels authentic to myself. That's raising a child who knows that they don't have to follow my path or someone else's path. Not having to follow a traditional anything. I think that's a very millennial thing, right? Because it feels like I'm in this almost in between phase. I very clearly see where we came from and why my parents believed the way they did, what they did. And my child, I'm hoping, who's a teenager now, is somehow going to magically get to the answer that I'm never going to have access to. Does that make sense? And I know each generation has their own struggles. But I think she's not starting with all of the, I don't want to say baggage, but there's probably a better word. But she's not starting with all.
I don't know. Baggage sounds right to me.
Right. Yeah. My expectations for her are completely different, I feel like, than what my parents were for me. I mean, they wanted me to be happy. They wanted me to be successful, but they absolutely defined that differently than what I do for mine. What do you think, Lucy? What is your definition of success?
I think I resonate with that, just sort of deciding for yourself what an authentic life looks like, what authentic choices look like, to where at the end of the day, like you feel There's this weird thing. I'm going to make this weird parallel that you might not understand. But my boyfriend and I, we play the Lego games. They're like made for kids. They're also fun because you have to like break stuff. But in the Lego Star Wars game, there are like these little puzzles that you do when you play as R2D2. You twist and you like match the pattern. And I feel like when I know that I've made an inauthentic choice, I feel like that puzzle before it's done. I can feel it like in my chest. It doesn't match. But I feel like when I'm able to reconcile it somehow or just make the choice that feels closer to what I want to be, whether I can vocalize that or not, it feels like I'm like solving that. It's like a state of equilibrium. And so
Yes.
I don't know if everybody feels that way, but I literally tell that to my boyfriend when I'm feeling that way. I'm like, I have that R2D2 feeling like something needs to click. And so I think just being very in tune with that and noticing when it's not in place and just trying to grow your awareness and get yourself to that place where it's as aligned as it can be.
Wow. So that makes me think of a question for you, Lara. When you were kind of going down the getting married, buy a house road, did you at any moment have that R2D2 feeling?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, absolutely.
You did.
You can only fool yourself for so long, I think, before you're like, okay, I'm really tired of struggling all the time. Or why doesn't this feel right? From some of my earliest memories was getting a hold of a National Geographic that my dad used to get delivered to the house and going through those and imagining all of these places that I wanted to travel to. And I still desperately want to. And I look back now and the moment that I made, and I didn't know at the time that that was what would happen, but the moment you start making those decisions to get married, to settle down, to put down roots in life, you start losing those options. And as soon as I started feeling closed in or like I didn't have those options anymore, you know, oh, I've got a house payment to make now. Oh, I've got someone that has expectations. And it started feeling very inauthentic. On top of that, the religious thing just threw all kinds of wrenches into my mental health and clarity and understanding about myself. Anything that tells me I am less than because of my gender.
Problematic.
Yes, it was. Now, doing something about it, that took a very long time. Because to break out of those systems is difficult.
It is. I've worked with many, many, many men who, got to the top of that ladder and was like, wait, what? This isn't what I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Or I was so focused on winning that I never stopped to think about what the game was. I remember once I was almost about to sign a contract about becoming an employee of a business that I actually helped to start. I walked around for like 5 days feeling like I had something around my neck, like a choker, but too tight. And I called my then husband and I said, I feel like I'm choking. He said, that's probably an indication that the decision you've made to go ahead with this is not the right decision. And I hadn't even related it to that. I was like 38 or 39.
Yeah. That's really interesting you say that because I feel like there are so many of these bigger decisions that at least I was expected to make at an age that I wasn't prepared to do so or experience. I think it was I would say my mid 30s where I really felt like I had enough information to make decisions like that. Now I have a question for you, Mad. So in the book, what she did was she left everything behind and went off to travel and go find herself. Realistically, a lot of us can't do that, even though I've been tempted. But for the 99% of us who can't, what kind of advice would you give us?
I think it's related to the story I just told. And I think what annoyed me so much about it is that she let it get so far. Like all the little signs, she just ignored them. She pushed them down. And I guess that's what I really encourage anyone to do at any stage of life is if you're like, this isn't right. And it's not like burn the boats, quit your job, because if you have responsibilities, but people, you can create something else as you're fulfilling your current responsibilities. You can change your life. Is it easy? No. Does it take a lot of extra effort? Yes, but it can be done. It's like, no, and you don't have to throw everything out the window and go to Bali. Like, it takes first noticing the little voice that's saying, you can do this. This would be good for you. And you can do your research, make your plan, save your money, and, get your kids and your partner to help you. I think it's often, oh, he or she is doing this other thing that leaves us out. No, get them involved and make sure they understand this is about you and your life and your happiness long term. Why should one person in a family have to sacrifice everything? So I think it's doing what Lucy does, is really paying attention to those moments where this doesn't feel right, and it can be subtle and it can be a physical symptom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things that I tell my kid is take your time on making those decisions. If something feels like it is pressuring you or rushing you, that is one of your key moments to step back and observe and try and understand, the decision more. And if you don't feel like you know the answer or you don't have an answer, it's probably because you don't have enough information. Sometimes that information can be in the form of experience. When she was just starting middle school, I remember she came to me one day, like crying. In schools, they take these tests to try and figure out what your natural skills are with the intention of pointing you to some career field.
Wow.
Which I feel is ridiculous, to be honest. And it started then, the pressure of, right? Because even before then, I guess, when they're toddlers, what do you want to be when you grow up kind of thing. I hate that question. First of all, I hate it now at this age. I'm like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. Stop. So yeah, I think on top of what you were saying, Madeline, agreed. And then take your time when you're making decisions, because if it's a big one, it's important, then there's time to make it. Right, Lucy? How did you figure out what you wanted to do with your life, what degree you wanted to get? Because you recently graduated.
I did, like within the last year. Honestly, I did not know, and I still don't think that I really knew until like the fall of my senior year, when I was just researching, trying to figure out where's a place I can even start. And maybe if it's not a right fit, then I'll change it. And I found the program that I ended up in, that was a specific kind of writing. Like it wasn't being an English teacher. It wasn't being like a journalist. It was somewhere in between, like doing all the other kinds of writing. And I was like, that sounds like interesting. And I really liked correcting other people's papers. Like I really liked being the person with the red pen, which is so funny, right? Like the reason why I got into what I do is like the opposite of how I approach it now. And so I discovered that I was in the right place, but maybe not for the right reasons at first. And then it took being there and learning and being open to come out on the other side as closer to the person and the professional that I wanted to be.
Yeah. So the one thing we haven't gotten to, and Lara has kids and I have kids, obviously, we haven't really talked about how your generation is thinking about having children. Because one of my kids is really pretty serious about not having kids, which is more the norm, I think, among the younger people.
I think that's true. I definitely have a few people, like people I've known for a long time, that have expressed to me for years now. We're not even that old, like I'm 22, and just decided that that's not something that they want to worry about or do, mostly because of the state of the world. They feel like it's inhumane to have a child and subject them to whatever the unknown future is. I don't know that I necessarily subscribe to that. I'm definitely more of an idealist and hope that we keep getting better. We keep learning to keep trying. I don't know sort of what that path would look like for me. I just know that I feel like as I get more experience and continue to take other steps, like stepping into my career and moving forward with my relationship and just stepping into independence, like gradually, like you said, Lara, taking my time, that part, it might feel like it continues to make more sense the further along I go. But it's sort of like that distant thing that will probably happen, but we're not trying to pick out names and decide what age exactly yet.
Yes. That makes a lot of sense, honestly. It does. And if I had to do it differently, that's what I would do, because I think Gen Z is asking a lot of the questions that millennials didn't feel like we could, at least not early on. I was the oldest of 5, and I was handed the expectation that kids is just part of being an adult. You didn't really question it. You just did. It came along. That's what was next. But Gen Z, like you just said, Lucy, they're being a lot more intentional. They're asking the same kinds of questions. Do I want kids? Do I just feel like I have to have them? What's the purpose behind them? Can I live a happy life without them?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that makes a lot of sense. Looking at the cost of living, like you said, the state of the planet, access to health care, especially being female and being the one to likely carry it if that was part of the process. And I honestly respect that a lot. It's not selfish. I think it's very thoughtful.
And the only message I remember getting that really stayed with me is my own mother saying, whatever you do, you have to have kids because it's the best thing ever.
Aww.
She said about my sister and me, you two are the best thing to ever happen to me. And you know what? I feel that way about my own kids. So it would make me sad for my son to miss that. But I also, I'd be happy for him to miss the pressure, the financial responsibility.
Yeah.
The, no sleeping.
Yeah, and I think that Gen Z has a lot more that they're aware of. And as a result, a lot more things they have to contend with when making the decision of whether to have kids or not, right? I mean, if you add just on top of all of these things and our understanding of what kind of impact kids have or having children has on mental health, both good and bad, it's always amusing, not in a funny way, how little we are prepared for it. I remember walking out of the hospital with this little thing in my hands going, why am I allowed to take this home? For real. Like, I do not understand. This is like the biggest thing in life you could possibly be doing. The thing that could have the most impact is raising another human in the world, right?
Yeah, no, it's true. I remember their dad and I looked at each other and we were like, who thought this was a good idea? I think most new parents feel that way, even if they think they're prepared. And I was nothing close to that.
But I don't romanticize it for my kid or idealize it. And I'm a single mom. I have been her whole life on my own raising her. This is a struggle. These are the struggles that go along with it. And yes, I still tell her she is the best thing that happened to me. But I would never want her to make a decision based on that.
Right.
Yeah. Do you think Elizabeth Gilbert had kids, or what wound up with her?
I don't think she did. I know she got married. She wrote 2 extraordinary novels. So those I did not throw across the room.
I do think that there's something to be said for her journey of going out and getting yourself lost in order to, have that experience. I think every young person to some degree, I feel like, should have that as a natural part of their life. I still love that idea.
Me too. Oh, yeah. Maybe I need to go back and reread it and figure out what made me so annoyed.
Madeline, I think you made some very valid points.
But I think that her big lesson from that is pay attention. Pay attention when you realize you've taken a wrong turn. So don't let it go so far that you wake up one day and feel like you're dead inside. But thank you for sharing your story and your perspective. today. And really, I love seeing the 3 generational contexts and how things can shift in some ways and maybe not shift so much in others.
Thinking about Eat, Pray, Love, like whether it felt like an empowering blueprint, a cautionary tale, or even a self-indulgent claptrap, the real takeaway here is this: every generation gets handed a script, and sometimes the bravest thing we can do is decide not to follow it.
So thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, tell your friends. It really helps more people find the show and join the conversation.
And as always, keep minding the gap with curiosity, courage, and a little bit of rebellion.